Hi folks, welcome back. Thank you for watching. Please do hit subscribe if you haven't done so yet. As always, it really does help when you do that. Welcome to episode 5 of Ditch the Fix, and today we're going to be talking about how to choose the right gear for recording a certain piece of music and also to have in your home studio. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about my basic philosophy when it comes to signal flow working in the studio. But first and foremost, let's start right at the top. This is an instrumental guitar song, so we're going to need some guitars. And being in the style of late 60s, early 70s rock, we are going to want some vintage voiced guitars, which is handy because pretty much every guitar I own is vintage voiced. And I keep them all next door, so I'll take you through there now and we can have a little chat about which of them we might want to use on this song. So here we are, welcome to my sitting room, as you can see. And these are all of my guitars, and I'm going to use as many of them as possible on this song because, again, the main point of this recording is to show you guys different recorded guitar tones, so the more guitars I can fit on there, the better. So I probably won't use the gem on the end there. To be honest, that guitar doesn't get too much use around here anyway, but it's a great guitar. I love hanging on to it. It's a great thing to have, but it's not something that gets much use. But for the rest of the guitars here, they're pretty much all vintage voiced old school guitars. So Strat, Esquire Telly, kind of the very basics of the Fender world of vintage style, single coil, bright, spanky guitars. So those are going to be kind of the bedrock of the recording. This Dan Electro here is a kind of recent acquisition of mine really, and it's one of those guitars that in principle is actually quite a cheap, nasty guitar. It's made of this sort of hollow balsa wood stuff with this badly stuck on vinyl strip on the edge, but it's one of those guitars that's much more than the sum of its parts. It sounds really unique. Jimmy Page used to use a Dan Electro for that reason. They sound really cool, so I think I'm going to use that for one of the main guitar rhythm tracks on the song. This is a Gretsch Duo Jet. It has Black Cat pickups from Jamie at the Creamery in it. Really nice, quite thin but bright and chimey for that kind of Beatles type thing. It's great for sitting back in a track and just having it chiming away to fill out those high frequencies without really getting in the way of anything else that might be going on. This is my Hagstrom Viking here, which has PAF replica pickups from Matt at Monty's in London in it. Probably my favourite pickups I've ever played, and it's my kind of Gibson 335 on a budget type thing. And I want to use this guitar for the main lead guitar in the song, partly because it sounds awesome, but also because it's mostly hollow, which makes it very prone to feeding back, especially when using fuzz pedals. But that's exactly what I want for the lead guitar. I want it to be right on the edge of going completely out of control. So that's my plan at the moment, to use that guitar for the main lead. And then on the end down here, 4 Gibsons. So this is kind of the other end of the vintage guitar style market. The Black Studio on the end there has P90 pickups in, so it's kind of a 54 gold top type thing, and the Red Custom has another set of Matt's PAF replicas, so it's kind of going for the 1959 type vibe. The SG has Mojo gold foil pickups in it, which have a lovely high-end chime to them, so for the clean picking part, that's the guitar I'm probably going to use for that. I don't think I'm going to use the Honeyburst Standard too much in this song, because it's probably one of my 2 favourite guitars I own, but it is quite dark and compressed. It's a much more modern voiced guitar. Amazing for classic rock, but going for the sort of 50s, 60s, 70s vibe is a little bit not the right instrument to be using. So that probably won't appear, but the rest of these guitars will. And over here I also have this lovely Gretsch acoustic guitar here, which has a mini humbucker in the neck. And that sounds really cool. Again, it's a fairly recent acquisition of mine, but I really want to get that on the song as well because it records really nicely. Even though my mate Josh is going to be playing bass on this song, I do want to add a little bass harmony at one point. So this old 80s Hondo bass might make an appearance for a couple of seconds in the final video. I don't think I'm going to put any acoustic guitar on this song. It's just not really necessary for the vibe I'm after. So that's pretty much the basics of the guitars. It's going to be old school, vintage voiced, mostly single coil, but a few sort of PAF style pickups as well. So no big surprises, just the kind of the old classics. In terms of the other sort of basic things about my particular guitar setup, these are the strings I use, D'Addario EXL148. Pretty heavy strings, 12 through 60, but I really, really like heavier strings. I am actually experimenting with these at the moment, which are Newtone strings, handmade in England, so that keeps me happy. And I can also choose my own custom gauge. So I'm really enjoying these at the moment. They won't appear on this song, but they might show up on my channel in the near future. And in terms of picks, good old-fashioned Dunlop .73 yellows. Really great, used them for years, no reason to change it. So that's the guitar sorted, let's move over to pedals and amps. Now, my main recording pedal board lives under my bed over there. I'm not going to show you that in this video, partly because there's going to be a full kind of gear rundown demo video coming soon where you'll see that, but also I am right in the middle of rebuilding it at the moment, so it's a complete and utter bomb site. So I'll leave that for another day. But over on the shelves here, I do have some other pedals which I want to get into this song. So as I said, fuzz is going to be the mainstay of this song. I want it to be the absolute bedrock of the sound. So the main lead guitar, as I said in I think the second video, is going to be this Williams Audio Mark I tone bender, amazing sounding fuzz pedal. And I do want to get the Mark II in there as well, so I think this will be the main harmony guitar. So we're going to have two tone benders going off at once, which will be nice. The Williams Audio, again, Ram Fuzz, which is a kind of ram's head big muff replica, sounds incredible as well. So I want to use this on one of the main rhythm parts, but I'm thinking I might try this on the bass as well, because I know Chris from Muse likes to use a big muff on his bass and it sounds really nice. So I might experiment with that when I track bass with Josh in a few weeks. For the main kind of fuzzy rhythm sound, I want a nice, rounded, dark, kind of warm sound. And the only pedal I think I can really use for that is this, which is the NKT Red Dot Sunface from Analog Man. Probably, or arguably, the best fuzz face replica ever made. It sounds absolutely incredible. So that's going to be the main kind of rhythm fuzz sound for this song, I think. Aside from that, overdrive pedals, to be honest with you guys, I actually prefer, or typically prefer, modern boutique overdrive pedals. I like the dynamics of those. Old vintage overdrive pedals tend to be a bit too compressed for me. So something like the old Boss OD1 sounds great, and I might use it in this song, I'm not sure yet, but I wouldn't typically use it for a main overdrive song. It's kind of like one of the earliest Tube Screamer pedals, this, and it sounds really cool, but it is very compressed. So I typically like the modern boutique overdrives, and I was just going to try and use nothing but vintage pedals, or pedals with vintage parts, such as the old Williams fuzzers. In the end, I decided that I think I'm going to try and use a combination of both, kind of modern boutique stuff and also some of the vintage classics. Just wanted to kind of mix it up a little bit. So for modulation effects, I'm not sure whether the old CE1 will make an appearance. It might do, it might not. I haven't quite decided yet. The Electric Mistress, though, it definitely will. Probably my favourite pedal ever made. I love this flanger. So that will definitely be on there somewhere. In terms of delays, I've got the Analog Man ARDX20 on my board. I absolutely love that delay, so I'll probably just stick with that. But there is one part of the song where I want to have one of the sort of crazy self-oscillation delay sounds in there. So I'm probably going to use, if I can find it, there she is, the good old Ibanez 8080 for that. Incredible sounding delay. For the rest of it though, you know, this will go on there somewhere for the sort of classic rock rhythm sounds. The Effectro tube drive sounds great. BK Butler tube drive is down there as well. So I'm going to stick with some tube overdrive pedals for the rhythm parts. But mostly, as I said, when we're choosing gear appropriate for a song, I'm going for the old classics again. Fuzz pedals, some classic modulation sounds, and yes, and then we're going to move on to the amps now. So these are my three amps. I run them all together all the time in a kind of wet, dry, wet setup, which I'm really, really enjoying. That's quite a new thing for me, but I really, really like it. The dry amp in the middle is this Dr. Z DB4, which is quad EL84. I think it has a good amount of negative feedback in it, so it's not like an AC30. It's kind of much cleaner and quite a bit darker sounding, which for the dry amp in the setup is exactly what I was after. The wet amps are my trusty old Hughes & Kettner Pure Tone. It's been a mainstay in my rig for many years now. Love this amp, but it's kind of a sort of 40 watt plexi type circuit. And the Cornell Romany Plus, which is a 10 watt tweed amp. And I run both these outside amps with the EQ completely dialed out, so it's as kind of raw as you can get it. So the Cornell tweed thing with the EQ out has that kind of honky, middly, Joe Walsh meets Neil Young type thing. So it really fills in between these two amps, even though it's only 10 watts. awesome amp. And I have swapped the speakers out in all of them, as is typical for me. The Z has the Celestion Alnico Cream in it, the Husey has the Alnico Gold, and the Cornell has the Alnico Blue. I really like the Alnico speakers, slightly more compressed than ceramic ones, but I actually like that for recording. And to me, they're a bit warmer and a bit more detailed. They're less smack you in the face, but they're just much more pleasing to listen to. And again, the earliest speakers were Alnico, so we're going for that vintage guitar vibe. So again, there's no big surprises here. We're just using really good gear, hand-wired, point-to-point, really top boutique amplifiers, and some classic pedals as well. And most of these fuzzers have new old stock transistors in there, so for all intents and purposes they are the original thing, just built today because they use the original 60s transistors. So those are the classic sounds I'm going to be using on this song. Moving over to this side of the room, guys, this is my desk, this is where I sit, quite obviously, and the 3 mics from the guitar amps come into this XLR patch bay down here. Now I've got 4 inputs here for various different nice preamps, and the first 4 inputs go directly to my interface. So these are the ones I use for guitar pedal demos, because I don't want to colour the sound at all for those, but for studio recordings I like using the nice preamps. So the 3 main pre's I use in here are Neve 1073 style preamps. This is a Warm Audio WA73, so it's a really nice pre and 3-band EQ. So I use that a lot for mixing. And down here, the MicTech MPA 201, which again is a 1073 style thing, dual channel, no EQ, but I don't really need it. And I also have this really old 1950s ex-BBC tube preamp, very crackly but can be cool to throw in on occasion. So those 4 preamps feed their outputs up here into the console. Now this is a very new thing in my studio. It's not a new desk, it's 1984 I think, and I might do a standalone video on my console because the way I've had it configured is quite unique. But essentially what happens is the mics feed in on these 4 channels on the right here. This is the one I'm using for the voiceover, so I won't turn it down. And I can pretty much create a blend of the 3 mics on the guitar amps and a room mic if I am using a room mic. And then 4 mono summed outputs of those mics comes down here to this TRS patch bay. And from there I can then send it to wherever I want. So I can have a completely clean version going straight to Pro Tools. I can then take another and put it through a Pultec style EQ, or the Roland Dimension D rack unit, which is an incredible vintage modulation unit. This is a Hairball Audio 1176 replica, an old Orban stereo limiter, and this really weird Russian delay unit down here. Kind of funny story behind how I got that, I might tell you that sometime, but it's really dirty, really noisy and grainy, but it sounds great. And also this Drama 1968 stereo tube compressor here. Love that on the mix bus, and it sounds really cool. It's got this big switch on here, so you can have your low end content as off, big, or bigger. So it's great for drums and great for the mix bus because it allows those low end frequencies through. It's a little bit like multi-band compression and it really gets your low end thumping. So I really love this too. So from there we go into the interface and into Pro Tools. So that's pretty much it, guys. There's no big secrets. Vintage voice guitars through fuzz pedals and old style modulation effects into hand-wired tube amps running at good volume so they're really working, picked up with microphones through Neve style preamps, summed into mono and then treated to any analog effects I might want before it goes into Pro Tools. But that also leads me on to a little bit about my recording philosophy in terms of signal flow. Now, there's no right or wrong answer when it comes to recording anything. However you want to do it is fine. As I think Andrew Sheps once said, the only thing that matters is what comes out of the speakers ultimately. How you achieve that is completely irrelevant. Your average music consumer won't care that you've used a Pultec style EQ or an API preamp. They just want to hear music. So that's all that matters, is what ultimately comes out of the speakers. But for me, the way I like to do things is I like to get as much of the final polished sound as I can using analog gear before it goes into Pro Tools. So I'll have an analog delay pedal in the front end of my amps and record that before it goes into Pro Tools. Or if I'm recording, say, an acoustic guitar with a microphone and I know it's going to need some high-end EQ and a bit of compression, I'll do that using an analog EQ and compressor before I go into Pro Tools. Once the recording is in the box, it doesn't generally come out again. Although I am going to make an exception for this because I want to mix the drums using the analog outboard. So I'm going to play around with that a little bit, which is one of the reasons for using a much higher sample rate on this song than 44.1. But generally speaking, that's what I like to do. I like to think and challenge myself. How can I get that sound, whatever it might be, using analog stuff outside of the computer? How can I do that? There's always a way. And if it means that I can't use things such as shimmer reverbs, then that's absolutely fine by me. I like using that analog stuff before I go into Pro Tools. The more stages of conversion you put your signal through, the more degraded it gets. So I like to keep conversion to an absolute minimum. So keep it analog until it's digital and then leave it digital. So there we are, guys. That's how I'm going to be doing this entire thing. And I'm now going to start tracking the rhythm guitar. So I'm going to mic the amps up, get some fuzz sounds going on and make a lot of noise. So in the next video, you'll see me breaking down some of those rhythm guitar parts. So hopefully that should be fairly interesting in the grand scheme of this series. So thank you for watching, guys. Please do carry on writing in with your questions with hashtag AskPerky. You can comment underneath these videos or email me. Either's absolutely fine, and if I can answer your question using a video, I absolutely will do. And please do carry on subscribing to this channel because, as I said at the start, it really, really does help when you do that. So thank you, guys. In the next episode, we're going to be making a lot of noise, and yeah, I will see you soon. Bye-bye.